Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the comments section. My name's Brian, if you're new around here, but if you're part of this ever incredible, and thank you guys for being a part of this group, 74,837 of you guys, future everyday millionaires, working our way, working our best to try and be the best selves that we can be, and be financially responsible and enjoy gaming. It's a weird blend. We talk a lot about games and a little bit about life here. But welcome, Ben. Welcome back. And if you're part of the 80% who have yet to subscribe, you're loved. And I'm just glad you're here. Hopefully you enjoy this video. Now, if you're brand new to the channel, the comment section is where I do a deep dive into what you guys have to say on all the videos, the news, the guides, the topics. All of this is ideally here for me and you just to sit down, grab a cup of coffee, talk about games, and so much more. So thank you guys so much for your comments. If you ever want to be featured in a comment section video, just drop them. Yeah, leave your questions and all that in the comments below. That's why I love making content, is to try and help you guys enjoy your day even more. But beyond all that, this video kicks off, and the title of this video is something very important to me. Gold LBS writes, Lost Odyssey and Blue Dragon deserve sequels. Xbox has the money and studios to make a proper JRPGs. FF is huge, so make sense of Xbox wants these games, but they don't need them. And I think this is really critical, because if you guys never had the opportunity to play Lost Odyssey and Blue Dragon, these are some of my favorite games from the Xbox 360 era. I think essentially that's kind of this weird period where Final Fantasy was just really kind of struggling. They were stuck in the PS2 era, and this was a while before Final Fantasy 13 dropped, if I'm remembering correctly. And Lost Odyssey was just a great experience. And it had interesting, in my opinion, DLC, which I purchased. Now, it was a multi-disc game, and it is now, I believe, playable digitally, but it's been a process, because this was done by Mistwalker, which was the father of Final Fantasy. He went off to do his own thing after leaving Square Enix, and this just was such a great experience. And if they were to do a sequel, because I feel like this would be a really good game to have a sequel follow-up for, you would have to obviously make sure that people were in place, because if you didn't do it justice, well then, yeah, I think everybody would feel like that was a wasted effort. And we haven't really seen much out of, Miss Walker in a long time. And I think that would be very important. Now, Xbox doesn't need to do this. Need is such an interesting word, in my opinion. But I think essentially what would be really exciting to see is that building that up, because regardless, like whether you feel Microsoft will or won't acquire Square Enix, should or shouldn't acquire them, I think partnerships or more. And if they want to go in and start helping fund games to get off the ground, I think that's just as good as an investment rather than just purchasing a studio outright. But maybe that's even more difficult. Maybe we're oversimplifying that approach, because talent can leave, and video game development is really hard, and I wish people understood that more, especially when I see people mad. But that's just Twitter for you. Anyway, StemFep follows it up, says, I'd love to see a sequel for Lost Odyssey. Problem is, JRPGs weren't popular with Xbox gamers back then. Maybe that has changed, but I'm not sure. And I don't think it's truly changed. I think that there's more of them because there's more gamers, and Xbox is also PC, if you kind of think about that as a brand. They let you play on both, and that would be what we'd want in this case if Microsoft was publishing it, to have it on PC and on Xbox. But that is something where Microsoft continually drops the ball. They've struggled naturally in Japan all these years, and even when they've had success in the 360 era, they dropped the ball going into the Xbox One era, and now they have to continue to work even harder to bring in that talent. And so this is something where it doesn't mean that it will always be this way, but Xbox still has to build that audience, because if you're asking me where I'm going to play my Final Fantasy game, it's going to be on my PS5, because that's where it's going to be more or less right now. And that's what Sony has done. They've really, and it's interesting to see that if Sony ever decided to purchase Square Enix, it would feel really natural, because they've already been making these big deals, already really associating the PlayStation brand with Final Fantasy. And yeah, and then essentially that's where Lost Odyssey and another kind of competing JRPG would be interesting to see. But we haven't seen that in the industry. And lately it might feel like this way, is that everything is becoming more and more safe, because it's becoming even more and more risky. Heck, Capcom was talking about just the sheer cost and risk and everything involved in today's modern gaming. And that in and of itself, I think, could lead to, hopefully not, to another future video game collapse if things aren't addressed appropriately, or you're just going to get monetized via microtransactions out the wazoo, because that's how these games right now seem to be making money over the long time. Now, moving on, the Delivery Moogle says, wow, thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy schedule to answer my question. I mean, anything could happen. Microsoft is definitely making some big moves. Who knows what the future holds? And thank you for asking, Delivery. I do apologize that it took so long. Delivery is such a great supporter of my content over at Work to Game and here. Since I've stepped away from Final Fantasy 14, they've kind of taken that support away, but that's not a knock on them. That's just me celebrating their freedom to choose to watch the content and participate in the topics that they want to participate in. So I've always been a big fan. I love seeing Delivery Moogle, and their comments in on all my videos. And what's one of the fun things that I see over time and time. One of the things that I like to do is drop hearts on comments, and overall, what that does is that I don't know how YouTube uses it, but it does start to put badges on people's names, just like Oh No Smolleral Cats. You can see that little heart badge because they've commented enough that I can make heart I mark their comment with a heart enough times, then they get that little badge, and it helps me remember more and more people who are coming back to the channel and asking questions or engaging in the topics. But anyway, they write, the problem is that Square Enix just isn't worth the $4.5 billion. It would be a giant waste of money unless Microsoft really wanted to give Sony the shaft. Still, if there was a charge, I wouldn't do it. Buying Square Enix now would just be jumping onto a sinking ship that has no means to turn itself around, and all you'd get out of the deal is Final Fantasy titles, since they haven't bothered to prop up any of their other franchises, not even Octopath. And Dragon Quest would be the thing I'd push back on. I feel like actually I'm like, for Final Fantasy is a bigger franchise, but I think I'm a bigger fan of Dragon Quest as just a franchise in and of itself, because that's kind of my first love, and that's one of the things that I've talked about multiple times with gaming, is that gaming is different. You've heard me, and I was making the argument to Reforged, and he completely missed the point, but because he then extrapolated into hamburgers. And if you're curious, you can go watch his live stream. It was a great conversation. But the idea is that video games, in a way, just like social media, act as natural monopolies with the individual IPs. Right? There is no Xbox equivalent of Mario. There is no Sony equivalent of Mario. And when it comes to these first party games, like, they hold so much weight. We know that sells a piece of plastic. We know that's going to sell the Switch. We know that's going to sell the next Xbox. We know that's going to sell the PlayStation. And in those natural monopolies, that is where this almost in a way an addiction kind of occurs. It becomes beyond more than just a user and a product. It becomes kind of this relationship, this team that gets built around individual IPs. I mean, you look at me, for example. I've followed Final Fantasy from Nintendo to PlayStation to wherever I can play it. Most likely waiting for PC for 16, but it is what it is. Now, when it comes to Octopath and other IPs, this is where just the overall cost and risk in development of these games is that they've kind of built themselves into this world where if they're not, making just insane amounts of money and they're not promoting it so much, that the cost of and the risk too hasn't been paying off. And we've seen Square Enix, even the new president, talking about the reshift back into HD games as a point and focal point of investment for their future growth. And we'll have to wait and see what that means, because if Square Enix now is really only Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy with a couple of offshoots with different IP, which they've struggled with, look at Forspoken. While I enjoyed it, clearly a lot of people, I don't know, the internet gets weird because a lot of people like to kind of tear things down rather than build them up, but that is just the nature of it. Now, Cosmos follows this up, says the problem with Square Enix is that Microsoft would have to manage them. They have a poor track record of managing studios. Sony would be the best option for Square Enix because Sony has a standard of quality that it is willing to manage Square Enix. And I think Sony's standard of quality is something that they have earned as a reputation. Now, when it comes down to management, though, I don't actually want, like within any of the studios that Microsoft acquires, for them to really manage it. I just want them to be the purse. I just want them to be the fact. Now, it's still in business is business, and the studio knows that they need to deliver, and so you still have that aspect going for them. But beyond that, you have the reality, and this is kind of where it's going to bite them and it's going to win. And it's weird because Microsoft is blamed for Redfall, but Microsoft isn't managing Bethesda. Like, they are letting Bethesda be Bethesda and kind of run that whole thing, which is kind of what you want. You really kind of just want that aspect. But Microsoft takes the L for Redfall, and then, they take the W for Starfield. And that's just my view on it. You don't have to like Starfield. I think it's an incredible game. I'm enjoying playing it. I'm having so much fun. However, when it's all said and done, it's kind of, they are in this damned if you do, damned if you don't. But that's also because Sony has developed a massive reputation for quality, because they're willing to spend the $200 or $300 million to release that game that people are going to play, and then they're going to just set down. Where Microsoft ends up making more money due to multiplayer and games as a service as an option, and Sony is looking to step up their quality there. And it will be interesting to see if that does damage the reputation. Games as a service tends to have at least a dirty reputation right out the start, because you don't really get the service and you got the game and you want to play, but you gotta wait. That's never any fun. Now, moving on, Gizmongo Away Guy Gaming says, if they bought Square Enix and turned those games into exclusive Xbox machines, I think I would just quit gaming at that point. Losing Bethesda hurt it already, but if the future of RPGs for me is just what SE might be it. Time to grow up. I butchered reading that. Dyslexia just completely overtook me in that case. But beyond this comment, I think it's interesting. Time to grow up is such an interesting idea. I'm 40. I play video games. I have 6 kids. I do invest more time into my children. We've been reading through Harry Potter. I think one of the things I try to just structure, I try to think forward in the future and try to kind of pre-game or pre-avoid dad guilt. And dad guilt is such an interesting concept when it comes down to how we versus mom guilt works. I don't think dad guilt truly kicks in until it's too late, because one of the things about being a dad ends up being that you go to work, and that's a good thing. You're providing for the family, and that's a good thing. That's an act of love. That's a sacrifice that I make, right? I could go sit on the couch and watch TV all day, and we'd be homeless, or I can go to work and provide for the family, and there's a joy in that. There's also I feel like my wife works way harder. Being a stay-at-home mom, that is a hard job. Let's not deny it, but I think dad guilt doesn't truly kick in until later, because you can justify the providing and those aspects, and then later essentially go oh man, I didn't read to the kids, or didn't play catch with the kids. So we play baseball, we do all these kind of things. And yes, that means gaming does actually take a big back seat. And that's one of the reasons why I end up enjoying the games that I do. I think what I tend to see, and this is just my observation, it doesn't mean that it's true, but what I tend to see is that those that have a lot of time to game are the most unsatisfied with the hobby, and those of us who have time, get some time to play, just generally have fun, and it ends up being such a good thing. And so what I tend to see is there's a juxtaposition between, well, the reason maybe why you're so pissed is because you're over consuming the product, and it doesn't feed you the same dopamine just like any kind of drug would, right? So just something to balance in and of itself. Now, would somebody truly leave gaming? I mean, the thing that Xbox does that I wanted to see Sony do, that I want to see all these studios kind of evolve into, Xbox doesn't mean that if they did purchase Square Enix that you'd have to buy an Xbox to play it. You have your PC. You have cloud, and ideally, what I want to root for them to do is to also bring games to PlayStation. That's what I'm going to root for. I'd love it to go all over the place, every which way and direction. But maybe that's a future that's a little bit further off than our current reality. But I do still feel like over the next 10 years, the gaming landscape is going to look insanely different. Now, for our final today, Kill All Conservatives writes, no, for one, Microsoft isn't going to be in gaming in 10 years if Game Pass doesn't hit 100 million installs. Out of Phil's leaked mouth. Plus, they want to buy Nintendo, Warner Brothers, and a few others. Literally, plan is to be a monopoly. A company that is owned by Microsoft, Xbox, cannot be trusted. Look at all the track records of games from Rare closing. Did Rare close? To Redfall. Xbox is a curse for studios. Look at Starfield being looked at last gen standards on a console. I think Starfield actually is incredible. And so it's interesting here. It was also interesting to call out their name. In this case, Kill All Conservatives. I was talking with Zoila, and I wish I should have gotten the comment to highlight for you guys. I apologize. Maybe I'll do it in post. But they're talking about how, from a gaming perspective, in a way, Xbox is seen as maybe more masculine, while Nintendo and Sony seem more feminine. And it's interesting. I've also seen people point out that Xbox seems to be more conservative, where PlayStation seems to be more liberal, and this isn't a one-to-one. This isn't like this is how it is or it isn't. It's just some people then start to apply the real world and things that are going on in the real world to their gaming libraries in this case. But anyway, just to kind of highlight that, it's fascinating because this would then this based off their just username alone, this would then in my way reinforce what Zuila and some others have kind of stated when it comes to that aspect. Now, will Microsoft shut down in 10 years? I doubt it. I don't know if they're going to hit 100 million installs. It's going to be an interesting narrative for them to push, because there is definitely a fire lit, and Game Pass is their platform, and they want to get to that 100 million, clearly. Like, that would be an insane amount of money. And Phil does want to buy Nintendo Warner Brothers. Like I said, over the next 10 years, guys, like, I think when we look back at 2033, we're going to be like, holy freaking, like, do you remember when gaming was this way or that way? It's going to be interesting to see. Now, Xbox can't be trusted. Also interesting, because this is kind of the core of it. One of the things that I see from like Reforged and other, I would say more leaning Sony content creators in the space is that it comes down to trust. Phil Spencer and the Microsoft CEO wants gaming to be everywhere, and the business side of it is they recognize the console and the exclusivity is this weird outlier outside of any other industry, to where you have to buy a specific, like, I don't have to buy a specific, like, an Alienware PC to play a certain game, and so PC gaming ends up being kind of where, like, gaming, and I'm glad to see them supporting it. Now, whether you think they can and can't be trusted, that's what they continue to say. I think it benefits them in the long run, which is one of the reasons why they're perfectly fine in making the additional cost to get gaming there. But I do believe that's where they want to go. And when gaming is everywhere, that doesn't mean less innovation. That means more investment and more innovation. We're seeing that same thing happen in the handheld space, where that hasn't happened in so long, because handhelds have just been dominated by Nintendo. And now that more games are in more places, while you don't have Nintendo's library on your handheld unless you hack it, which you can, and that's what people do, you have more options to play those games. We'll have to see. Now, at the end of the day, we'll have to wait and see. Like, it all comes down to, like, trust. But for me, I'm just never really worried about it, because I'm just too damn busy. Like, that's where I know that a lot of people will get, frustrated with me. They think, they could say whatever the hell they want. But at the end of it, like, when it's all said and done, like, I'm going to play games. Most likely it's going to be PC and cloud. And and it's something that we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, I can't predict the future. I can only tell you what I feel, and from what I see, when I read, and tends to be correct. I think I know it's funny, because when Mike from Giant Bomb, Michael Byrne, was making fun of me. He's like, I root for you to be wrong, because you're so right. It's like, yeah. So I appreciate that. Anyway, I was on the Giant Bomb podcast, if you guys want to go check that out as well. That was a great show. We talked about the acquisition and more. So if you're looking for more content in your day, I'll see if I can't include a link in the description of this video for that. But other than that, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you just have a great freaking day, and I look forward to seeing the next one. But until then, take care.